Did Pennywise die in IT Chapter 2? It's complicated. IT Chapter 2 saw the losers defeating Pennywise, but did they really kill IT? The answer is as complex as the creature's origin. IT Chapter 2 brought the losers' story to an end after their final encounter with IT/Pennywise in the sewers of Derry, Maine, but a big question remains: did Pennywise really die at the end of IT Chapter 2? Stephen King has terrorized generations of viewers for years by allowing them to explore a variety of fears and meet different villains, human and supernatural, in his novels, and the one often considered his most terrifying book is IT. Published in 1986, IT was well received by critics and readers, becoming an instant favorite among King's fans and a classic in the horror genre. Set in Derry, Maine, IT introduces the audience to a group of kids self-named the Losers Club who come across an evil, shape-shifting entity they simply refer to as IT. This creature awakens every 27 years to feed off the fears of its victims, and for that, it takes the shape of its target's biggest fears, though its preferred one is Pennywise, the dancing clown. IT covers the losers' story in two parts, the first one set in 1957, following the losers as kids, and the second one set in 1985, following the adult losers as they reunite one final time to defeat IT. The success of IT has led to its adaptation to other media, most notably a miniseries in 1990 and a two-part movie in 2017 and 2019. To better tell the story of the losers and their battle against IT/Pennywise, Andy Muschietti's IT covered the losers' journey as kids, though set in 1988, and IT Chapter 2 covered the part of the story where they return to Derry as adults, thus also covering their final battle against IT. Both the miniseries and IT Chapter 2 stayed true to the novel and the way in which the losers finally defeated Pennywise, but it also left the big question of whether Pennywise really died in the sewers or not, and the answer is as complicated as the origin and nature of IT, as it did die but not entirely. In King's novel in IT Chapter 2, the adult losers go to IT's lair in the sewers of Derry to confront it one last time, and after some tragic events, such as Eddie's death, in the novel, IT bites his arm off. In the movie, he's impaled by the creature. They take out IT's heart, who, by then, had already transformed into a giant spider, and crush it, seemingly killing the creature for good. However, Pennywise has been referenced and spotted in other King novels set after the events of IT, leading the audience to question if the losers truly killed it or not. IT originated in a void outside the macroverse, and its species is called deadlights, but its real shape can cause insanity in those who see it, and so it took the shape of a giant spider, as that's the closest thing to its true shape that the human mind comprehends. Now, when the losers crushed IT's heart while in its spider form, they killed IT's physical form and severed its connection to Derry, thus why the town was destroyed, but the true entity still lives in another plane of existence. Some readers have pointed out that, with its physical form defeated, IT would have returned to its place in the macroverse and would have starved to death, as Pennywise and its other physical forms are what allowed it to feed. However, it's also possible that IT has enough power and control of the deadlights that it could manifest in another physical form, hence why IT and Pennywise have been referenced and spotted in other Stephen King books. IT/Pennywise is one of the most complex and mysterious creatures in Stephen King's universe, and not all questions about its nature and more will be answered. IT, what Pennywise is you'll float to means IT's Pennywise is already a terrifying creature, but its most famous line, you'll float too, only makes it more horrifying. Here's what it means. What Pennywise is you'll float to means IT's most famous shape is Pennywise the dancing clown, and in addition to its unmistakable appearance, Pennywise has a signature line, you'll float too, and here's what it means. For decades, Stephen King has terrorized generations of readers with a variety of horror stories with different characters, creatures, settings, and exploring different fears, and one of his most popular and beloved works is IT. Published in 1986, IT received mostly positive reviews, becoming one of King's most famous stories, and one that has gotten different adaptations, a miniseries in 1990, a TV series in India, and a two-part movie. Set in Derry, Maine, IT tells the story of a group of kids self-named the Losers Club, who in 1957 come across an evil entity living in the sewers, to which they refer as IT. This creature wakes up every 27 years to feed, and it does so off the fear of its victims, achieving this through its shapeshifting abilities and thus taking the form of its victims' biggest fears. Although IT can take any form it desires, its preferred shape is that of Pennywise, the dancing clown, and even during its return in 1985, IT continued to terrorize the now-adult losers as this nightmarish clown. Although clowns can be terrifying to many, Pennywise was especially horrifying as it has the ability to lure children and change from a seemingly harmless clown to a murderous creature in less than a second, leaving its victims unable to escape. To add to Pennywise's evil and terrifying image, the clown has a signature phrase that, especially in the movies IT and IT Chapter 2, is repeated quite often: "They all float down here. You'll float too." Although the phrase is represented differently in the book and the movies, it has the same meaning in both, as it's Pennywise's way of subtly telling its victims, mostly young children, that they will die. As mentioned above, IT lives in the sewers of Derry, and that's where it takes most of the bodies of its victims. In the novel, "You'll Float Too" takes a very tragic and sinister meaning as it's literally a reference to how dead bodies float in the water in the sewers. The line is first found in the opening chapter of IT, when Georgie is talking to Pennywise, who is hidden in his storm drain. Pennywise offers Georgie a balloon and the young boy asks if they float, to which the clown replies that they do, and so will he when he's down there with him. In the movie, however, float is represented differently, though also literally. The losers get to IT's underground lair in the third act of IT, where they find a bunch of decayed circus props, the belongings of its victims and their bodies, with those of its child victims floating around. Pennywise's "You'll Float Too" line has also been interpreted differently, mostly due to the creature's supernatural origin and mysterious species. A common interpretation of this phrase is that it refers to where the souls of IT's victims go after they die, as they wouldn't go to heaven nor hell, staying instead in the deadlights, which would be a sort of limbo, thus floating in that middle point for eternity. This would also allow IT to use the souls of its victims as it pleases, which is why Georgie was seen as a separate manifestation of IT. "You'll Float Too" is one of the most memorable lines from Stephen King's IT, and its meaning only makes the title character and the story even more terrifying. Stephen King's IT theory, Pennywise is also the Crimson King. Stephen King's IT introduced Pennywise the dancing clown, but a theory suggests IT might also be another King villain, the Dark Tower's Crimson King. One of the many Stephen King theories swirling around the horror space over the years has been that Pennywise is also the Crimson King. Many King fans believe that the IT antagonist, best known as the Dancing Clown, is actually a physical manifestation of the Crimson King, who appears in the Dark Tower series as well as some other King novels. Others speculate that the two villains are simply of the same species. King himself has never taken the time to speak on these theories. Here's what we think. IT is the title character and the main antagonist in King's 1986 horror novel, IT. IT is an ancient, cosmic evil that resides in the fictional town of Derry, Maine, resurfacing to terrorize the children there every 27 years. IT has myriad supernatural powers, including the ability to shapeshift, to change reality, and to appear invisible to adults. Throughout IT, the antagonist most often takes on the form of Pennywise the Dancing Clown, famously portrayed by Tim Curry in the 1990 miniseries Adaptation and by Bill Skarsgård in the 2017 film and its 2019 sequel. The Crimson King, meanwhile, is the key antagonist of King's 8-part Dark Tower series, as well as the 1994 novel Insomnia, which arguably deserves a movie adaptation, and the 2001 novel, Black House. The Crimson King is the ruler of the Red, also called the Random and the Outer Dark. He can generally be described as the embodiment of evil, and is constantly attempting to destroy the Dark Tower, which keeps time and space going. The Crimson King and Pennywise share a number of interesting similarities, which sparked a theory that they're actually the same entity. The theory details that Pennywise, or more technically, IT, is actually the Crimson King. According to the theory, they are not merely relatives or of the same species, they are one and the same character, with Pennywise being a physical manifestation of the Crimson King. This would mean that the antagonist so many readers and viewers have come to know from the IT book and screen adaptations was, all along, the Crimson King, a true force of evil.